All right. So, just ended up finishing up 1960, The Making of the President. I want to go over it a little bit. I think it deserves a full review rather than just a little clip at the end. All right. Well, first of all, I definitely enjoyed the game. I think that came through in the videos. I want to compare it to a couple different things. I want to compare it to Twilight Struggle, which I think is probably the most similar CDG mechanism type game that I've seen of this, with the, trying to position control all the time, etc. And I also want to compare it to the other set of political simulation games that I've got, because I think this is a topic, American presidential races, especially the primaries, but the presidential as well, that I have a number of games on, and I really like the topic a lot. So I guess the first thing I should do is go over the components, because that's the least important, right? Get these nice little wood blocks. Great. I love these. I love the state seals chits. They serve almost no purpose in play. The same values are present on the board in every state. I don't really need these things. They make me happy. They're pretty. They're nice. But honestly, I don't know how to fold them. Okay, I'll figure that out later. Okay. Rule book. It's okay. Busy, lots of colors. Probably a good thing to distract your 6-year-old with while you're trying to teach them the game. I don't think they're terribly bad. It's a simple enough game that it can deal with that kind of treatment. I do think that the sample turn, with its color coding to match the time periods, confused me at least once in the game when I tried to look up a rule and got the sample turn instead. Turns out not to be too big a deal in this, because there aren't any special cases really, but I would rather have more distinction between them, and certainly less color in something. So yeah, I mean, the counters are nice. The cards are these ultra stiff, sturdy variety. I don't know how much sturdier they really are, because I have the feeling that their stiffness is going to cause more likelihood of damage in attempting to shuffle them. But for people who use condoms, whatever. The debate track, this is an expensive piece of cardboard. Again, maybe not that necessary, but this is a Z-Man's game, and I get the feeling that they're aiming to kind of put out a certain level of component, and I think they manage that quite well. The only real complaint I have, except for the stiff cards perhaps, is this bag. It's icky. It's really disgusting to touch. Minor complaint, but functionality-wise, I really like the bag as a randomizer. I like the effects it puts on choices in play. It's not truly random. It is something that your play determines what your odds of getting these more expensive, more painful options are. And maybe if I wasn't playing solitaire especially, I would be able to think clearly enough to say, I've got a lot of chips in there. I can take a risk on advertising because I think I'll get more out of it. What else? All right, let's go to comparison of the game itself. First of all, to Twilight Struggle. This is a much simpler game than Twilight Struggle. First of all, you don't have to worry as much about specific cards coming up. I'm sure knowledge of cards is valuable, but I definitely felt like in Twilight Struggle I had a lot more need to know what was in the deck and what was going to screw me over. In this, there are some nice combos, there are some things that maybe you really need to pay attention to. Fold it in that. There we go. But it felt fine playing it. I didn't feel ever that, geez, if I had known about that, I would have played completely differently in terms of cards being in the deck. There are cards, the preventative cards, you don't know necessarily how bad the effect is of what you're preventing. But I think it's a reasonable assumption to say if I have a preventative card that covers just a couple events, those events are probably, at least one of them's at least as bad as using this preventative card this way, so I should think about it. There's a lot less chance in the game. You move around, you collect your influence points or whatever. There's not as many options for things of, I'm going to roll the dice to see if I get this. It doesn't have that. There's very few places where you draw from this bag. And I don't think that they're the most common things that you'll be doing. So I kind of, I see it as having a little less luck, maybe, with the control over the bag and with the lesser number of luck events. Of course, the deck has a tremendous amount of luck in it, but that's mitigated by the more powerful cards don't give you cubes in here. So, I mean, there certainly is a luck factor, but I think it's less than in a lot of CDGs. All right, let's compare it now to some of the other political, I'm going to stick to the American political race games that I have. I've played a lot of these, and currently I have Candidate on Order. I can't really speak too heavily on that because I've only played that a couple of times, but I really, really liked it. And now that's a primary candidate run, as is Road to the White House and Campaign Trail. Although Road to the White House at the very least can run the presidential election, I don't think it's a very interesting game to play as the presidential election. I've done it a few times. It's okay. I think this is as, let me try to say. So, Road to the White House is the monster game of, and it's not a monster by any means, but it is sort of the largest and most complex of the political simulations I have. And it's got a certain place in my heart because of that. It's also kind of an annoying game. There's a lot of little bits that you have to pay attention to, little, you have to read all your advantages. You can have very complicated characters, and some of the ones that are made that come as defaults in the game are, who require a lot of effort to keep up with what effects you're having on the board on anything that you do. And those can be a real pain in the butt. Campaign Trail is sort of the slimmed down version of Road to the White House. I don't like it because of that. But it allows you to just do the movement and the vote collecting aspect of Road to the White House, which is okay, I guess, but I've just never been that into that aspect of it, and in some ways that's always been kind of part of the complexity in Road to the White House, is you have to write down how many votes you have at each place. You have to keep track of, you have to kind of try to play memory with what everyone else is, where they've been visiting, where they're likely to hit. Okay. picked up Landslide too. I remember liking that, but that's Monopoly-like. So now let me think. What was the other? Certainly Mr. P. Oh, Candidate. Candidate, I remember being a very, very simple, fluid game, and in some ways it reminds me of this. I think this captures the same level of play as Candidate does, where you've got everything out in the open. You can see it all. You can't be sure what's going to happen and how people are going to bid or whatever, but you can see what's going on as it's happening. And in this, you can see all the chips on the board and how well you're doing in various places. Let's look at the final one is Mr. P, Mr. President, the old 3M game. That's a long-time favorite of mine. Great. You're handed a deck of cards, and you basically decide where you want to cast them. There's some luck involved, actually quite a bit in terms of rolling dice, seeing whether you can get into the right states and all kind of factors like that. And then you count up your votes at the end, and you see who won the states. And that also is a president versus president game. I think this one is among the top in all of them. It may not be as attractive to me as Mr. President, just because it's a little longer, there's a little more thinking involved, it's a little less of just a pure silly game. I'm not saying Mr. President's silly, but I am, it's much lighter than this. So I think if you want something, I'm not sure how long this takes because of the way I kind of spread out time when I'm playing. I mean, it's taken me about a whole day, but I'm doing other things in there. It feels like it's a couple hours. That would be my guess. It feels a couple hours, whereas Mr. P, I know, is like a half hour. So you have a difference there. In terms of complexity of the system, etc., though, it's very, very light. I mean, the rules are really summarized on this page. Almost everything you need to know is right here, including the special cases of the debates and the election draw day. Yeah, I looked back in the rules to make sure that they weren't wasting, these other 20 pages that are here. And they almost are. This is an argument for the sort of Tim Jim style rules where they just say, hey, let's play. Here's what you need to know. It's one page, and here's all the details. Now, to be fair, all those details are so filled with colors and pictures and this, that, and the other that there probably aren't more than a couple pages of rules in the actual game. So I think it's kind of nice to have this summary that really contains everything. Once you've played it once, this is definitely all you need. Is it all you need when you read the rules? Very, very experienced players of games in general could probably figure out most of what they need from this and a slight understanding of some of the other factors. But I think the rule book as a whole is a necessity. I think it could be a lot shorter, but people are paying for lots of color and heavy rules that, you're not going to be mistaken in these. They're not confusing. I'll put it that way. Overall, yeah, it's a pretty good game, and I would definitely suggest it, unless you have something really, really against the CDG mechanism. And even if you do, I'm not sure that this is a good entry point to CDGs. It doesn't feel like you have to know as much as you know in some of the other games. And it's a good political representation of this particular one campaign. It goes into a lot of details on this. You know what I would love to see? I would love to see, it wouldn't be a fair game as such, but But I would love to see some sort of treatment in this kind of detail, CDG, whatever, of the 1860 campaign. That one had to be amazingly interesting. And I could actually see a whole series of interesting presidential campaigns, ones that were especially intriguing. Coming up with some kind of framework. Unfortunately, Road to the White House doesn't do it because it has these fixed, values to states and values to for the electoral count. It would have to be a game that allows you to bring a lot of new components and expansion rules, etc., into it to run these different campaigns. Now, obviously, you could put out a different game for each campaign, but I don't know if the market's there for that. I mean, especially for key campaigns. I'm not talking about running every single campaign here, but I'm talking about there have been some particularly interesting campaigns where the election was not only up for grabs, but maybe there was a lot going on that's really cool. This is an election where there was a lot of issues going on that really resonates with people. The first televised election, Nixon viewed as the stronger candidate in all ways, really until the debates came, and he was sweating like Nixon. Anyway. And this is the campaign that changed politics, as far as I'm concerned. We no longer have the very strong, well-regarded candidates who have a lot of who've garnered support throughout the country. We have the charismatic guy who looks good on television, and it's not just at the presidential level, it's all the way down. So this was really a watershed campaign where we moved from somebody like Adlai Stevenson having any kind of chance to where those are at best third party issue oriented candidates who they're never going to make it, but even though their issue is so strong and they have such powerful statements to make about it, they can still garner some support. Now just think that if you could pre-package that. But unfortunately, the people who are charismatic and come across well, they've spent their whole life learning how to be that instead of learning how to handle the issues very well. Wandering into a rant away from the game. But it's a good game. I'd definitely go with it.